What if enlightenment isn't fireworks, but silence? Most people picture awakening as a dramatic explosion, white light, mystical visions, or a sudden superpower of the mind. But Buddha never described it like that. He spoke of something quieter, more human, more intimate. Not gaining something extraordinary, but letting go of something heavy you never needed in the first place. Imagine wearing sunglasses your entire life without realizing it. Everything looks darker, tinted, slightly off. Then one day, you take them off. The world didn't change. You did. Colors were always bright. You simply stopped filtering them. That is enlightenment. It's not adding wisdom. It's subtracting illusion. It's not becoming someone new. It's remembering someone you already were. Before the tension, before the stories, before the constant mental commentary saying, not enough, not complete, not there yet. For most of our lives, we walk around carrying a subtle hunger, a belief that peace is elsewhere, that fulfillment is a destination, that freedom is a graduation we haven't earned yet. We meditate, read, practice, chase breakthroughs, hoping one day we will arrive. Then awakening gently whispers, there is no arrival. You are the place you were seeking. Buddha described enlightenment as the end of clinging, not the end of experience. Thoughts still come, emotions still rise, pain can still knock on the body's door, but the inner contraction around them, the resistance, the negotiation, the need to fight reality, it softens, dissolves, and eventually stops demanding control. It's like holding sand too tightly. The tighter you grip, the more you lose. The moment you open your palm, nothing is lost, nothing is taken. Everything just rests where it already was. Enlightenment feels less like certainty and more like clarity, not answers. Freedom from needing so many answers. Not special insight, freedom from needing to feel special. And here's the quiet twist. You don't feel enlightened. You stop feeling the need to ask if you are. Because the one who needs validation, the inner narrator, the defender, the comparer, the seeker, slowly fades from the driver's seat. What remains is not emptiness in a bleak sense, but emptiness like the sky. Silent, vast, allowing everything, owned by nothing. This is why Zen masters smile at questions about enlightenment. Not because the question is foolish, but because the asking itself contains the answer. The longing is proof you already recognize the truth. The same way a fish senses water without naming it. When seeking ends, not by force but by exhaustion, something tender happens. You stop running from your mind and begin witnessing it. You stop searching for peace and begin noticing it. In the pauses of your thoughts, in the softness between breaths, in the moments you stop trying, there it is. Not dramatic, not loud, unshakably simple. You were never becoming the light. You were removing the hand that covered the flame. Most people spend their lives searching for a moment that feels like awakening. Something loud, lightning bright, undeniable. But what if the biggest transformation in your life doesn't roar, but whispers? What if enlightenment isn't gained, but noticed when the excess falls away? And now, we will move to the first core part of today's video, the quiet signs of awakening. What truly changes when the self falls away? Awakening, in the Buddhist understanding, is not an upgrade of the mind, but a relief from it. It is not collecting more answers, but realizing you no longer need to hunt for them. At some point, the questions that once kept you awake at night lose their urgency, not because you finally solved them, but because the one who demanded answers so desperately has softened. You begin to notice that thoughts don't trap you the way they used to. They still appear. They still float through your awareness. Loud, chaotic, beautiful, absurd. But they no longer feel personal. It's like sitting beside a busy road. Cars rush past, but none of them are yours. Before, every thought felt like a command, a crisis, an identity. Now, they are simply weather passing through an open sky. One of the deepest signs of awakening is subtle but radical. The sense of a solid me begins to thin. Not dramatically, not as a sudden ego death where you disappear into cosmic fireworks, but gently the way mist dissolves when morning light spreads across a lake. Experiences still occur, feelings still arise. Life continues in full color, but the owner of those experiences starts to loosen its grip. You still get angry, but the anger doesn't wear your name tag anymore. You still feel sadness, but it doesn't spiral into a story about your worth or unworthiness. You still feel joy, but you don't cling to it with trembling hands, terrified of losing it. Most importantly, pain can still visit, but suffering, with the resistance to pain, the personal war against what is, fades. Pain is life. Suffering is the negotiation we try to make with life. Awakening is when the negotiation ends, not in defeat, but in acceptance. A quiet, powerful surrender that says, if it's here, let it be here. This is why enlightenment is described as seeing reality exactly as it is, untouched by illusion. The illusions were not hiding out there. They lived in the constant commentary of the mind. When the commentary softens, reality appears unfiltered. This is also where enlightenment meets nirvana, often misunderstood as a mystical destination. Buddhism describes nirvana not as a paradise you enter, but a fever you recover from. The fever is craving, aversion, delusion, the internal struggle that keeps the human heart restless. Enlightenment opens the door. Nirvana is stepping through, realizing nothing was ever missing. Nirvana has no location. It cannot be reached by moving forward, upward, or inward. It is experienced when the movement to become finally stops. When you are not improving yourself, defending yourself, fixing yourself, or performing yourself anymore. When you sit with your heart as it is, scarred and sacred, without needing it to be different. And perhaps the most misunderstood sign of awakening is this: there is no longer someone who owns it. No inner voice that says, I am awakened. No trophy self, no enlightened identity, just awareness itself, spacious, unclaimed, quiet. Imagine dropping a handful of salt into a river. Does the river brag about being salty now? Does it claim transformation? Of course not. It simply flows, changed but unself-conscious. That is awakening. Not a dramatic rebirth of identity, but the falling away of all identities that felt heavy to carry. So the real question is no longer, how do I reach enlightenment? But rather, what part of me is still holding on so tightly that life feels heavy? The answer won't arrive as a thunderbolt. It will arrive like a breath, soft, unnoticed, natural. And the moment you stop trying to grasp it, you may find it has already been quietly holding you. If awakening feels like a homecoming, calm, familiar, uncreated, then a natural question arises. Are all spiritual paths pointing to the same home? Many traditions describe the destination with different languages, symbols, and metaphors. Yet the longing underneath is identical, the end of the seeking self. And that brings us seamlessly into the next part of today's video. One awakening, many doors. Why Buddhism points to no ultimate self. Let's begin in ancient India, where the teachings of Hinduism offer one of the most poetic descriptions of awakening. The self, Atman, is realized to be the same as the absolute, Brahman. The seeker doesn't become the divine, but recognizes they always were. The wave realizes it was never separate from the ocean. It rises, dances, crashes, and dissolves. But its nature was always water. The revelation here is union, identity, oneness with the cosmic source. In Sufism, the mystical heart of Islam, awakening is experienced as fana, the annihilation of the self in divine love. The drop disappears into the sea, not through loss, but through overflowing surrender. It is not emptiness in the cold philosophical sense, but ecstasy, losing yourself because love became larger than you. A Sufi seeker doesn't dissolve into nothingness, but into unbounded devotion. In the mystical path of Christianity, the language shifts to surrendering personal will into God's will. Ego is not transcended to become everything, but to become an instrument. Saints speak of becoming hollow reeds through which divine breath moves. Awakening here is obedience, intimacy, devotion, a room emptied so God may enter. In Taoism, awakening sounds like nature itself speaking. There is no dramatic transcendence, only attunement. The sage doesn't climb upward to meet truth, but relaxes into its current. This is Wu Wei, effortless action, not forcing life, not fighting life, not improving life. Simply allowing the rhythm that already is. The river does not push toward the sea. It is pulled by harmony, not ambition. So here we sit, surrounded by traditions that look different on the surface, yet resonate in unison at one key point: the end of the small self that strives, clings, grasps, and separates. They all agree, liberation is not adding something, but releasing someone. But Buddhism takes a radically different step here. While other paths describe union with the absolute, the divine, or the cosmic self, Buddhism gently refuses to point to any permanent ultimate identity at all. There is no eternal I that merges, no fixed source to dissolve into, no supreme witness that waits behind the curtain. Instead, Buddhism points to emptiness, not as nothingness, but as interbeing. Not I am the ocean, not I dissolve into God, not I return to the One, but rather, there was never a separate self to begin with. There was only relationship, conditions, movement, cause and effect, interwoven beautifully, impersonally, temporarily. This view is grounded in dependent origination, the understanding that everything arises because of everything else. A flower is sunlight, rain, soil, time, hands that planted, the air that danced around it. Remove its conditions and it cannot stand alone, not because it is insufficient, but because it was never separate. So enlightenment in Buddhism is not merging into a greater something. It is realizing there was never a boundary between you and anything to merge across. No bridge is needed when the two sides were never two. And this unfamiliar idea leads to a surprisingly familiar feeling. People who describe awakening, whether Buddhist monks, wandering mystics, or ordinary humans who suddenly see, often use the same words. It felt like coming home. Nothing changed, yet everything was different. There was no more distance between me and life. It wasn't extraordinary. It was obvious. Because awakening is not an ascension upward. It is not an achievement. It is a recognition of something simple that was always true but overlooked, like wearing glasses and searching the whole house for them. No drama, no heavens opening, no cosmic handshake, just the quiet dissolving of the one who felt separate, and the natural embrace of belonging to everything without owning anything. When the chase ends, life doesn't collapse. It flows, not as you becoming the universe, but as the universe no longer being other than you. After understanding how awakening is not about merging into an ultimate self, but about seeing the impermanent, interconnected flow of life, another question naturally arises. Who then can authentically speak about enlightenment? And this brings us smoothly to the next part of today's journey, the quiet wisdom. Who can truly speak of enlightenment? It's tempting in our modern world to look for authority, a certificate of spiritual success, or someone bold enough to claim, I am enlightened. Yet the Buddha, with his timeless insight, never presented enlightenment as a badge to wear or a title to announce. Instead, he pointed to something far more subtle: humility, clarity, and freedom from self-interest. True wisdom is recognized not in loud proclamations, but in the gentle weightlessness of presence. You can sense it in someone who helps without seeking acknowledgement, who guides without forcing belief, who listens without judgment. Their words are simple, yet they carry the echo of truth. Their life is the teaching. There is no need for spectacle, no craving for admiration, no attempt to convince. So how do we discern genuine insight from mere performance? The Buddha suggested a remarkably simple test. Observe the mind and heart, not the words. Does the person still argue to prove themselves right? Do they create division between those who follow and those who do not? Do they require your belief as if starving for it? Or are they gentle, like wind moving through trees, touching without claiming, guiding without holding on? Often those who are truly awake are the least likely to claim it. Their very humility is a signal. Imagine a master painter who has completed countless masterpieces. Yet when asked, they smile softly, pointing only to the next blank canvas. Their art speaks louder than any statement. In the same way, The enlightened do not need to label themselves. Their being is enough. And here's the liberating truth. You don't need to accept anyone's words blindly, not even the Buddha's. He encouraged self-verification. Don't believe it because it sounds wise, or because it comes from someone famous. Don't even believe it because it comes from him. Instead, observe whether it brings more peace, more kindness, and more freedom from suffering into your life. Truth is not dependent on recognition. Water is wet whether you believe it or not. The sun rises even if no one watches. The same holds for reality's ultimate truths. The person pointing toward it is only a mirror. Their personal claim is irrelevant. This perspective also invites a deep personal responsibility. Enlightenment is not a concept to be memorized, but a living experience to be verified in the body, heart, and mind. When someone's life demonstrates patience, compassion, and freedom from clinging, you are seeing the reflection of awakening. Not because they told you, but because their life cannot hide the quiet clarity within. And yet the most astonishing part is how subtle it is. Enlightened beings do not broadcast, they do not perform, they simply exist in the freedom they have realized. There is no one left to be enlightened, and in that, Nirvana is naturally present. The absence of self-interest and ego is the most tangible sign of what awakening truly looks like. As we explore this, notice your own mind. Who do you trust and why? Are you drawn to charisma, authority, or the quiet honesty that asks nothing in return? Often the path of discernment itself, the practice of observing, testing, and reflecting, brings you closer to the insight that words alone cannot deliver. So, in today's segment, we've moved from understanding the nature of awakening in different traditions to seeing that true enlightenment is lived, not claimed. And in our next part, we will go even deeper, exploring how the end of seeking and the return to home is the essence of awakening itself. Imagine for a moment standing in a quiet room, the sunlight gently filling the space, and suddenly realizing you've been carrying an invisible weight your entire life. That weight isn't outside. It's the constant grasping for what you think you need. Recognition, love, understanding, or a perfect self. In those first few seconds of this recognition, your breath deepens, your shoulders relax, and a subtle truth begins to whisper, you were never lost. And this naturally flows from our last discussion. After recognizing that genuine wisdom is lived and not claimed, we move now to the heart of today's exploration, the essence of awakening, coming home to yourself. Awakening is not an achievement you can hang on your wall, nor a title to display. It is not something to obtain or possess. Instead, it is the gentle unfolding of reality as it is. It occurs when all illusions of self, all compulsions to seek, all fear and grasping quietly dissolve. The mind discovers that it has never actually been separated from the life flowing around it, that all along it was already home. Time has no hold over awakening. It does not begin or end. There is no timeline or milestone. The Buddha never positioned enlightenment as a finish line, and modern psychology mirrors this insight. True transformation is not about reaching a point on a map, but about shifting the relationship with every moment of experience. You stop running. You stop grasping. You simply allow what is to be. Krishnamurti expressed it beautifully when he said, "Truth is a pathless land. There is no instruction manual, no step-by-step formula, no guaranteed method. Awakening arises when you stop resisting your inner darkness, when you are willing to look honestly at your fears, pain, and ordinary human struggles. This is where real healing occurs. In the simple, sometimes uncomfortable act of facing reality with open eyes. Consider a person who has chased success, recognition, and security for decades. They have accumulated titles, possessions, and accolades, yet a quiet unease lingers. One day they pause. They sit. They notice their breath, their heart, the subtle sensations in their body. They see their desires, their judgments, and their need to define themselves. Slowly, the pressure begins to fall away. Not because something magical happened, but because they stopped clinging to illusions that never served them. That is awakening. Awakening is coming home to what has always been present. recognizing that there was never truly a need to search elsewhere. All the missing pieces were never outside. They were within. And in that recognition, there is profound relief, an intimacy with life that cannot be described, only experienced. Tears may come, but they are tears of release, gratitude, and tender recognition. It is important to understand, this does not erase the challenges of life. Pain arises, loss arises, conflict arises. But the mental story that transforms these experiences into suffering begins to fade. You meet life directly. You no longer filter it through me and mine. Emotions come and go, but they no longer bind. Joy flows without grasping. Anger arises and dissolves without leaving scars. Life is still life, vibrant and raw, but you are no longer in resistance to it. And this is why awakening is often described as a homecoming. You do not reach it after years of striving. You realize that the lostness was an illusion. The treasure you've been seeking, the peace you've been craving, was within the very awareness that has always accompanied you. The cage you thought needed escaping was never locked. The door has always been open. So when we ask, what is enlightenment? The answer is both simple and radical. It is the end of searching, the gentle recognition of your own presence, and the freedom to see life without adding or taking away. You stop seeking a self that never existed, and in that recognition, you discover an intimacy with life so natural, so full, that it feels like coming home after a long journey. In today's video, we've now traveled from exploring awakening across traditions through recognizing who can authentically speak of enlightenment, to understanding the essence of awakening itself, the quiet, profound homecoming that is your birthright, always waiting for your recognition. Have you ever imagined enlightenment as a magical state where every moment is bliss, where pain disappears, and every thought turns into a golden insight? Most of us at some point have bought into these visions of spiritual perfection. But today, we're going to gently unravel these illusions and explore what awakening really looks like. Following our previous exploration of the essence of awakening, coming home to yourself, we now enter common misconceptions about awakening and what it truly is. In this segment, we will uncover the illusions that often cloud our understanding and guide us closer to the truth of liberation. First, enlightenment is not an eternal emotional high. Joy does not permanently replace sadness, nor does peace erase every discomfort. Life remains vivid, sometimes raw, sometimes joyful, sometimes sorrowful. What changes is the relationship you have with these experiences. You no longer identify with every thought or emotional wave. You witness them, allow them to pass, and feel the freedom that comes from not being bound by them. Second, awakening does not grant supernatural abilities or mystical visions. No light appears above your head, no divine fire ignites your third eye. These images belong more to fantasy than reality. Real awakening is quiet, often invisible to the outside world. It happens in the simple, intimate moments, noticing your breath, feeling the sensation of life flowing, sensing the gentle impermanence of all things. Third, it is not about becoming perfect, immune to mistakes, or free from human suffering. Awakening does not erase your humanity. Pain, loss, and fear will still appear. The difference is that you no longer feed them with stories of resistance, self-blame, or why me. The suffering born from clinging and rejection naturally falls away. What remains is clarity, presence, and a subtle but profound freedom. Fourth, enlightenment is not a title, a rank, or a certificate of spiritual achievement. No one will hand it to you, and no amount of credentialed practice can guarantee it. It cannot be proven, displayed, or compared. And paradoxically, those who are closest to genuine awakening rarely speak of it. Their lives are the teaching, quiet, compassionate, grounded in reality, and free from the need for validation. So what is awakening then? Awakening is a subtle yet radical shift. You stop being defined by the story of me. The inner narrator loses its power. Thoughts, emotions, and identities arise, but they no longer imprison you. You feel free from the constant pressure to maintain a mental image of yourself. You recognize the impermanent, interconnected, and empty nature of all things, the dance of causes and conditions that form the world. You touch the ground of your being without grasping, without needing to be anything special. In essence, awakening is inner freedom, not attachment to any mental or emotional state. It's seeing reality clearly, the impermanence, the lack of a permanent self, the interdependence of life, and being with it fully. You do not need to chase perfection, bliss, or mystical experiences. You simply meet life as it is with honesty and openness. Imagine for a moment that awakening isn't a distant, mystical event, but a subtle shift happening right here, right now, in the way you breathe, in the moments between thoughts, in the silence that lingers after a strong emotion passes. If you've been following our journey so far, you already glimpsed what awakening is not. It's not a constant high, not a badge of perfection, not a supernatural state. Now we step into the practical path, the tangible ways your inner world can begin to transform. So in today's segment, we explore the practical path to inner transformation and awakening. This is where philosophy meets lived experience, where ancient wisdom finds a foothold in the rhythms of modern life. We'll see how small, consistent practices can dissolve the illusions that bind us and open the door to the quiet freedom within. The first cornerstone is observing your mind without trying to control it. Most of us have spent decades attempting to fix, improve, or manipulate our thoughts. The irony is that the more we cling, the more restless we become. Awakening asks for a different approach. Notice the patterns, recognize the waves of emotion and thought, and allow them to move without forcing or resisting. It's like watching clouds drift across an open sky. They appear, they shift, and they pass. You remain the vast sky itself, spacious and unbound. Next comes acceptance of reality, exactly as it is. Life will not always conform to our expectations, and suffering often arises from the struggle against the way things are. By relaxing this resistance, you stop feeding the fire of frustration, disappointment, or fear. Acceptance does not mean passivity. It means fully meeting reality with clarity and compassion, letting life flow without unnecessary tension. A crucial insight on this path is releasing the illusions of the self. We instinctively try to prove ourselves, to be right, better, more special. But every act of comparison, every subtle need for recognition, perpetuates the cage of ego. Real transformation comes when we stop identifying with these compulsions. We no longer need to win the moment, to validate ourselves, or to shape how others see us. This freedom is subtle but revolutionary, opening up space for authentic connection, creativity, and peace. Practical awakening also lives in daily mindfulness, not just formal meditation. Washing dishes, walking to the store, listening to a friend, all of these moments are laboratories for awakening. When you bring full attention, curiosity, and kindness to each moment, the ordinary becomes extraordinary. Every small act practiced with awareness compounds, revealing the interconnectedness and impermanence of life. Importantly, transformation occurs through facing, not avoiding, difficult emotions. Anger, sadness, fear, they will arise. The path is not to suppress or escape them, but to meet them with gentle presence. Like water flowing around a rock, emotions move naturally when they are allowed to be, without judgment or clinging. Resistance is what creates suffering. Acceptance is what dissolves it. Another profound point: peace does not come from controlling everything. It comes from letting go of control. We often equate mastery with happiness, but true freedom arises when we stop striving to dominate outcomes. Life, with all its unpredictability, can be embraced rather than resisted. This is the paradoxical secret of inner freedom. The harder you try to hold, the more you suffer. The softer you allow, the more awake you become. Finally, remember this: awakening arrives when the pursuit of awakening ends. The very act of grasping at enlightenment keeps it just out of reach. When the search itself is released, when you stop measuring, comparing, and chasing, the door swings open naturally. You discover that the peace you sought externally was already present all along. It was waiting quietly, patiently in the space that is always here, inside you. In essence, this path is not about magic, dramatic transformation, or spiritual accolades. It is about subtle shifts in perception, small acts of mindfulness, and a courageous willingness to face life fully. Step by step, moment by moment, the inner landscape begins to change, revealing the quiet, vast freedom that has always been your birthright. Imagine for a moment that the journey you've been on, all the searching, all the striving, was never about going somewhere new. What if awakening is simply realizing that you were already home, that the key you've been desperately seeking has been in your pocket all along? This is the profound essence of enlightenment, a return, not a destination. As the Buddha said, nothing happens, yet everything changes. At first, this may sound paradoxical. Nothing happens because there is nowhere to go. You have always been here. Everything changes because the illusion of seeking dissolves. The frantic pursuit that once fueled worry, desire, and restlessness melts away. The mind, once a storm of craving and fear, now finds its natural stillness. The body still feels pain, the world still presents challenges, yet the heart rests in a clarity untouched by circumstance. Enlightenment is not a prize reserved for monks, sages, or extraordinary people. It is available to anyone willing to stop looking outward, to anyone courageous enough to turn inward and meet life as it truly is. In that quiet, gentle recognition, you see, you are not lacking, you are not flawed, you are not lost. You are the pure awareness in which all experience arises and passes, the silent witness to every emotion, every thought, every passing moment. This is why the Buddha spoke of Nirvana as a homecoming. It is not a mystical place beyond the sky, not a state to be achieved in the distant future. It is here now, in the very act of being fully present. To awaken is to realize with tender amazement, I have never left home. The journey outward was an illusion. The true path has always been the path inward. Every breath, every step, every moment is already complete. Take a deep breath now. Feel the rhythm of your own life. Can you notice the space in which thoughts rise and fall, the open sky behind passing clouds of emotion? That space is always there, patient, vast, forgiving. It is not something to earn, not something to fix, not something to achieve. It simply is, waiting for you to recognize it. And here's the invitation. As you reflect on this, consider leaving a small mark on this shared journey. Comment one insight that touched you, one thought you wish to carry forward, or even a question that sparks curiosity for the next video. Promise yourself that in the moments ahead, you will pause, breathe, and reconnect with this quiet awareness. Let this be a gentle commitment, a seed of presence planted in your daily life, ready to grow with mindfulness and care. So take a moment, let it sink in. Feel the warmth of recognition, the relief of returning, the peace of being at home in yourself. Enlightenment is not distant, not dramatic, not contingent. It is the subtle, profound awakening to the fact that you are already enough, already whole, and already here. And as we continue this journey together in future videos, may each step be a step home, a reminder of the gentle, unwavering awareness that has always been yours.